Now I've done it. I've gone and made a situation go from bad to worse. So I was using the lathe tonight, and I was using the tailstock with the drill chuck. And normally, when I fit the Morse taper in, it fits really nice. And then to get it out, all I do is I back the quill all the way in past this face right here. And with the drill chuck, it's real easy because this catches, of course this won't fit, and it actually will pull out. So by design, the quill, the face of the quill can go further in and essentially pull this out. Well, I had a really hard time getting it out today for some reason. And when I took it out, I noticed that there's a spin mark there. There's scoring on the taper. I think I remember noticing that before. I didn't think much of it. Next operation was going to a bigger drill bit. I put in one of my Morse taper drill bits. Large one. Did the operation. That started spinning in the Morse taper. So I was having trouble. So I decided I'm going to take the drill bit out, inspect the quill, which is what I should have done in the first place. As soon as I noticed the problem. Could not get that drill bit out. It's jammed in there tight. You'll notice the quill's not in here now. Well, let me show you why. I could not get this to come out. I tried even grabbing here with vice grips on the area where the writing is, because that's actually a little bit smaller in diameter. So there's a tiny ridge here, so my hope was the vice grip's jaws would catch there and I would be able to use that to pop this out. Could not get it out. So then I figured, oh, you know what I'll do? I take the quill all the way out and I'll run a rod in from the back side and tap it out that way. So I happen to be looking through my old punches and rods and stuff that I have for doing that kind of job, and I grabbed this rod and I dropped it in, and it was a little bit too short. Then I really made the big mistake, which was I said, oh, I know what I'll do. I took the rod out, I took a short punch, and I put the punch in there. And then I put the rod in thinking, oh, I'll use the rod to tap the back of the punch and the punch will pop out the taper. It only took a couple of smacks for me to realize that this probably has popped off of the punch and managed to wedge itself in between the tang on the back of the Morse drill bit and the inside of the quill here. This is now jammed in there. So I have this small little slide hammer vice grip puller thing for pulling out like seals and stuff. So I've tried grabbing onto this rod and tapping it out, but that's not much of a puller, and I can only get maybe 4 or 5 smacks with this thing before it just pops off. It keeps falling off of here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to weld a nut onto here, and then onto that nut I'm going to weld a larger nut which will thread onto my larger slide hammer. Well, That's good. Question is the punch wedged in there too? Yep. That's going to be a much bigger kettle of fish. How the hell am I going to get that out? Well, I figure what I can do now, though, is maybe I can get a light down there and I can see what the hell's going on. Okay, so if I look down into this hole, I can actually see the back of the small punch that I managed to jam in there. I decided to do what a friend of mine who happened to stop by my shop earlier today to pick up a couple of things that he wanted to buy had suggested that I do. You see, he gets paid to do this stuff. So he said, why don't you just weld onto the end of the drill bit and use the slide hammer to pull it out. It's not the straightest job, but that's because I wanted to get right in there. But anyways, so now, of course, yeah, it ruined the drill bit, but then he brought up the point that I could just grind it back and still use it. Who knows, the taper on this drill bit might be toast anyways. But now let's see if I can manage to pull this darn thing out. Careful with this slide hammer. Yesterday I got a blood blister, right? A little black mark. Yeah, who cares, right? Oh. Alright, so that was a fail. Because I could try it again. Of course, I already shut the welder off for tonight. It's not that big of a deal, but I have to make a phone call to the local power plant and warn them ahead of time that I'm going to fire that welder up.
What do we got? Turbine trip?
Yeah.
Okay. Generator trip, full load, rejection, turbine trip.
Radiation in the containment.
Somebody turn off the goddamned alarm.
Jack, we still have high radiation on level 8.
Perfectly normal.
Jesus.
Just take it easy. There's nothing to worry about.
High water level in the reactor.
All right, plan B. Actually, by now this is probably plan Z. Got it set up in the press here. And what this is going to do for me, I'm hoping, is minimize the ability for the end of the rod to slip off of the end of the tang on the drill bit and fall into that place where it's getting pinched. And yeah, if you can't see me, I am wearing safety glasses. I think it's moving. Looks like this is probably the way I should have went in the first place. Hell yeah. Oh, look at that. Wow. Alright, let's get a better look at this over on the bench. Alright, back over on the bench, and looking down into the bore here, I can definitely see a very distinct line or something going on down in here. And looking at the bit that I just extracted from here, you can see there's a very bad area where it's marred pretty badly right there when it's spun. This is the chuck that I had in there when all my problems started, and when I got it out, which it came out with some difficulty, but when I got it out, I noticed this line right here, and I couldn't remember if that was there before or not, but now I'm convinced that that just happened, and it has to do with the failure because it's in the same exact location of the taper. So my theory is that I had a chip or something in the bore, or maybe it was on this and I didn't notice it. That's why you always clean your tapers before you put them together, right? And then put this in. That chip got jammed in there. The chuck spun and damaged this and damaged the bore. So I guess the proper way to fix this would be to regrind this Morse taper. Problem with that is the only way I could do that here is if I use my tool post grinder mounted on my lathe, and I'm worried about the precision or lack of precision in my lathe causing a problem. So I don't really want to go down that road. So then the other alternative is I could send this out to a shop and have them regrind it for me. But the cost of that, at this point, with the possible sale of the lathe being right around the corner, I think I'm going to forego that. I just tried the taper again. It actually almost feels like whatever was in there for the most part is cleared, but I can still feel that there's that little damaged area in there. So what I'm going to do is just try and clean that up a little bit. So I'm just taking a wooden dowel and slice a slot in it on the end, and then take a piece of abrasive paper and wrap it around and basically stick it down in there like so. And the wood dowel, won't damage anything if it comes in contact accidentally with the sides, and the abrasive paper will do its job of smoothing that out a little bit more in there and just cleaning it up in general. So the next thing I wanted to do is find out why the automatic ejection of the Morse taper does not work anymore, where I back out the screw. Once the quill goes in far enough, this threaded rod should contact the back of the taper and push it out. And when I took it apart, cleaned it up, there's a hole in the end of this. So my theory is now that there was a pin that either broke off or fell out. It could be that when I first initially jammed the Morse taper on that drill chuck in there and had really hard time getting it out, that I actually forced, tried forcing it and broke the pin then. So I went through my dowel pins and stuff and found this little pin. Fits in there pretty well. I don't want that to be able to fall out, so I'm probably just going to solder that in place so it'll be fairly strong but not too strong of a joint in case I ever have to take it out for some reason. But I'm just going to try it, test run with it first, and then if it's still too long, I'll cut it down. Alright, so I just did a test run, and it starts to push the pin starts to make contact and push the taper out with the quill about 1/4 of an inch out from the face of the tailstock. And it used to do it right when it was almost flush with the tailstock. So I'm just going to take, I'm going to eyeball it and take a smidge more off of there. Smidge. And solder that in and be done with it. Get a little bit of flux on the situation. Alright, so I heated this up with a torch and I floated a little bit of solder in there, and just enough to tack it in there. Huh. I just learned something new about this tailstock that I never realized before. I didn't know that this actually unscrews. Figure as long as I've got it unscrewed, I might as well double check that bore. I get even better light in there. Time for a test run. This is a leather faced hammer. Alright, so that's in there pretty good. Now, when I back it out, that pin should hit the back and pop that taper free. Just want to see when I can feel it touching. Right there. Nice. All right, good. So now I'm just going to clean up the taper on my drill chuck. What I'll do is I'll run that in the lathe. I'll run it in the truck, and I'll use some stones to basically get that rough area all cleaned up. That should do it. Thanks for watching.